So, affidavit of support, the I-864. We've been receiving a flurry of questions recently about the I-864 and the affidavit of support. And so today I really wanted to dive into the most common questions and dive into the affidavit of support, the I-864, and even more detail, and go over these common questions to clarify a lot of the rumors that are out there and help you to truly understand what is this dreaded affidavit of support, this I-864. So for any immigrant who is going through a process to receive a green card, the affidavit of support is part of that process. So if you're going through adjustment of status, or if you're doing a spouse visa or a fiance visa, this will be part of the process. And the reason for the affidavit of support is that in order to receive a green card, immigration requires that the immigrant beneficiary who is going to receive a green card, who is going to become a permanent resident, that he or she show the US government that they will not be a public charge. This is something that has been in place for many decades. And what it means in terms of public charge, so what does that mean? Is that the government wants to see that an individual who's coming here and receiving that green card will be self-sufficient, that they won't require government assistance. And so the way that you show that you won't require that government assistance and that you are self-sufficient and that you have financial backing is through this form I-864, the affidavit of support. And the I-864 affidavit of support is what the petitioner will complete. So the US citizen or lawful permanent resident petitioner who is petitioning their immigrant beneficiary, their spouse or fiance, they have to fill out this form with their financial information. And so with this form, the petitioner is having to prove what their current annual income is, which that is taken from the most recent year taxes. And the petitioner has to provide tax returns and paycheck stubs and other proof of income. So this is that required piece of the I-864. So I wanted to give you that 30,000-foot overview so you understand what it is that I'm talking about before I dive into these common questions. So we just went over what the affidavit of support is. I didn't pull up that banner, but what I just went over was everything that what is the affidavit of support. That's that 30,000-foot view. So let's dive into one of the most common questions that follows after what is the affidavit of support. The next common question is, I don't make enough. I heard I need a joint sponsor. What is that? What is a joint sponsor? So as I mentioned, the petitioner he or she has to complete that I-864 and provide financial information. The immigration has something called a poverty guidelines. It's referred to as I-864P, the poverty guidelines. So the I-864P shows how much the petitioner needs to make based on his or her household size. So it's not a one size fits all. It's not because people will ask, how much does a petitioner need to make? Well, it depends based on their household size. So if they have 2 dependent children or 3 dependent children, that amount will go up. And so the I-864P shows you how much the petitioner needs to make. If the petitioner doesn't make enough, then the next step would be using assets. That's another option, assets like a home or equity from a savings account or retirement account. But more commonly, the next step would be if the petitioner doesn't make enough, you'll have to get a joint sponsor. So that's where this question comes into play. What is a joint sponsor? So a joint sponsor is someone who will basically, they're stepping in, taking on this role of being the financial backing for the immigrant so he or she can receive her green card. So the petitioner still will have to complete an affidavit of support, but you would also have a joint sponsor who will be filling out this I-864 and providing their financial information. So who can be that joint sponsor if you need one? Anyone who's over the age of 18, and that person has to be a US citizen or a lawful permanent resident, and they have to be domiciled. They have to be living in the United States. And that person also has to meet the income requirements. So again, those income requirements come from that I-864P, that poverty guidelines. So the joint sponsor would have to make enough based on his or her household size to step into that role and to fill out that I-864 form and to be that joint sponsor. So then the next question is, hey, I have a joint sponsor and they want to know what are their obligations. This seems pretty scary for them to be filing this I-864 and signing the I-864. And that is very true because it is a very big responsibility. The I-864 form, it's more than a form. It really is a contract that you are signing. When you sign that I-864, it's a contract you're signing with the US government saying, hey, I am going to financially back this individual to receive their green card. I will provide financial support in the event that this individual is not able to work or not able to provide for their basic needs. So the obligations of a joint sponsor are, one, what I just said, providing that financial support, making sure that that individual can meet their basic needs, their basic living needs in the event they weren't able to. And then the second requirement is that if an immigrant receives what they call means tested benefits from the government, that you as joint sponsor would pay the government back for those benefits. Now, as a green card holder, you aren't eligible for means tested benefits. And what are means tested benefits? Food stamps, SSI, TANF, assistance for needy families. Means tested benefits are where the government is providing a person with financial assistance because he or she is below a minimum income line. They don't have enough for basic living requirements, and the government provides programs to pay for the person's expenses. So if an immigrant were to apply, a green card holder, and they're not eligible, if they were to receive any of those benefits, your responsibility as a joint sponsor would be to pay those back to the government. So it's a contract. It is a very big responsibility. But I do want to clarify what aren't the obligations of the joint sponsor. So a lot of joint sponsors are concerned, am I going to be responsible if the person owes money for taxes, they have credit card debt, they have student loans, they have any kind of private debt? If the immigrant's private debt would not be the responsibility of the joint sponsor. So it's important to understand that distinction. So as a joint sponsor, you are saying, I will provide financial support for this individual. And if they were to receive a means tested benefit, something from the government, I understand I'm responsible to pay it back because that person is not eligible to receive those benefits. I know that's overwhelming. There's a lot of different parts, but I wanted to make that distinction because I know a lot of joint sponsors are concerned that they're going to be responsible for all of the debt of the immigrant, and that's not true. All right. And then the last common question is, so am I responsible as a joint sponsor? Goodness, that's a mouthful. Am I responsible as the joint sponsor forever for this individual? No. So the joint sponsor obligations, and it's important to note, if you're a joint sponsor and it's for a couple, even if the couple divorces, you're still responsible. So that's important to know. And you will be required or responsible to be the financial backer for this individual until he or she has completed 40 quarters, which typically is about 10 years of work in the US. And once he or she becomes a US citizen, your responsibilities would end. So as soon as the immigrant has completed that approximately 10 years of work in the US workforce, or typically what happens is most people, their goal is to become a US citizen. As soon as they become a US citizen, your obligations will cease at that point. Okay. So those are some of the main FAQs. If you're watching this on the replay and you have other questions, I'm happy to address them. I know the affidavit of support is the aspect of the application that people have typically the most questions, that in the interview. So if you have other questions, please feel free to throw those in the comment.